Good day. Welcome to the conference about the project, the embryo project of cultural design and social design in Monchique. It's a project that we submitted to our research center, and it's part of a design and social sciences group of research. I will do a presentation about the work that we did before in Monchique, like 3 years ago with COVID in between, so it's been a while, and we are preparing a new staying in Monchique with students from all the project subjects in the Faculty of Architecture, and this time with the urgent support of the social sciences with Julia Carolino and the professor architect Jorge supervising all the work. This is a social design project with the theme Rurality, created with students from the Faculty of Architecture of the University of Lisbon at the invitation of the European Institute of Design in Madrid. That's how it started. It arose from a proposal by the Congresso Internacional de Alcaides e Inovación, made to students from universities in Spain, Italy and Portugal to work on innovation and about how to help recover population in clusters with less than 5,000 inhabitants. The chosen village in Portugal was Monchique. Monchique currently has 2,300 inhabitants, is located between the mountains and the sea, and has a strong artisanal and agricultural tradition. Isto era suposto passar sozinho. Pronto, vou ter que passar eu. Não, deixa estar, não faz mal. And has a strong artisanal and agricultural tradition. It was recently devastated by fires and is at risk of desertification, and has a very strong agricultural and handicraft tradition. It is therefore urgent to discover new solutions capable of attracting and retaining populations and revitalizing a traditional culture at risk of extinction. This project started with fieldwork during a multidisciplinary workshop with students from urbanism, architecture, product design, communication design, and fashion design. The projects were developed on the ground, and as issue emerged through naturalistic and participatory observation. Meetings were promoted with municipal institutions and local producers. Visits were made to urban landscape and heritage sites of interest. The municipal art gallery was provided to us to work with open doors to the population. Mental and subjective maps were drawn up indicating local production. Architectural, landscape and environmental points of interest in the region were visited. Visits to local craftsmen and life histories of artisans were made. This lady is telling about her work with a student. Inquiring about their motivations, intentions, individual and social meanings of their production. Drawings of new products to be produced with artisans were conceived, and films and photographic registrations were collected. Research was carried out from a qualitative and interpretive perspective in direct contact with the population, in a context in which both students and inhabitants are simultaneously interpreters and constructors of meanings. In terms of architecture, the work produced by the students mainly reflected on existing structures, such as architectural heritage to be recovered for cultural purposes and technological innovation. Within the scope of urbanism, landscape notable sites and touristic locations, abandoned local production structures and rural local production were visited, conducting to the conception of connectivity maps for the establishment of connecting paths between places and people. In terms of communication design, work was done on creating maps of interest in the region, communicating existing productive structures, artisans' brands, or even signaling places of interest in the region. Within the scope of product and fashion design, work was carried out with a view to recovering traditional techniques and local know-how, as well as updating the original meaning of products and ideas. However, the designer's work is iterative and moved between fieldwork and the design studio and the faculty. Returning to the faculty, concepts and visions were shared, the final proposals were discussed, and in the end, all the work converged in the same illustrative map of a joint intervention and a series of more detailed drawings. It is therefore proposed to work for a mountain range and a village in network with the world, sharing social practices and cultural production, nature, high and low technology, and sustainability. I'll do some reflections, more theoretical now, about the work that we're gonna do on social and cultural design. If we think that the theme of social design seems to be a new aspect of contemporary design, more concerned with social, political, and environmental issues, in contrast to the formalism that characterized design in the end of the last century, we can also observe that this role was already at the genesis of design as a discipline evoked in crisis situations, such as after the First World War, when artists were called to place functional art at the service of the reconstruction of Europe. In Germany with the Bauhaus, in Russia with the Constructivists, in Holland, in the reconstruction of India in the post-colonial context, and in the current context of desertification of the countryside and the characterization of villages and environmental and sustainability. This is because India here, it's because I discovered a wonderful book about Bauhaus in Calcutta. Bauhaus moved to Calcutta, even, I don't know if it was Calcutta that influenced Bauhaus or Bauhaus influenced Calcutta, because this Tagore, the president of India, he was already doing field work with artists and architects in the countryside after the independence. Walter Gropius dreamed of a school community in which artists and artisans from several disciplines would work side by side and create new architecture that would serve a new and renew post-war society. He appealed to Gothic and Indian temples by the collectives of craftsmen and artists as works of total design that resulted from the gathering of all the arts. Gropius describes the artist as exalted craftsmen and issues the challenge, let us create design and build the new building of the future together. It will be the result of combining architecture, sculpture, and painting in a single form, as it was done in this multidisciplinary workshop in Monchique. There was an incessant search and uncertainty at the Bauhaus constant experimentation, and the absence of a stable ideology, because a concern with utility was involved here. The concept of design with a social function and a practice-based social action. This objective was to make innovative products in the radical avant-garde reach the masses and thus overcome the division between high culture and popular culture. Popular here in the traditional sense, not the industrial sense. This gives a foundation and a purpose to an interdisciplinary approach and the search for new design models. Experiments are not an end in themselves, but a way to promote people's emancipation. The spirit of social responsibility was not confined to theory. Rabindranath Tagore, this Indian president, also founded the University of the World nearby Calcutta in 1919. This project emerges as a way of liberation from the stigma of colonialism, where art methodologies were developed, promoting knowledge of rural culture and craft techniques to contribute to improving the lives of rural populations in India. At the same time, Tagore promotes in-depth knowledge of Indian culture, forgotten during British colonization, with a view to a new Indian art associated with the Indian independence movement. With regard to teaching process, the project to revitalize the local craft culture should not only be taught by the teacher, but through practical experience on the site. Tagore wanted art to leave the ateliers for the public space and for people's real lives. Students are encouraged to blur the lines between art and craft and to be as versatile as possible. Working on a new visual culture needs artists not only committed to their individual expression, but also designers interested in designing functional and communication objects. It is also Tagore's idea, the need to internationalize artists, to make contact with other cultures, and thus become more creative and innovative, never abandoning their own culture. He sees culture as an instrument to reach the world and an open human perspective to our political, economic and social projects. Portanto, trata-se desta, it means this bridge between urban and rural, our culture and the local culture, past and future. For Tagore, modernism did not mean the imposition of an international style or a Western cultural imposition, but suggested freedom of thought, freeing us from insularities that limited our possibilities and deshumanize us. Indian modernists combined local and indigenous traditions with global elements to form a cosmopolitanism that subverted the binary logic of imperialism and nationalism, just like we want to do in Monchique. The work started in Monchique fits in with the proposals of the Bauhaus and University of Shantiniketa in India, in the sense that it puts students to work in rural areas, inserted in the location under study, in the multidisciplinary perspective by bringing together all the arts and by aggregation of all living forces. As in Hans Meyer, working with the population, reconciling traditional production and contemporary consumption, attenuating the difference between erudite culture and popular culture, which here means attenuating the difference between urban and rural culture towards a local cosmopolitanism, as in Tagore concerns. It is therefore a question for re-establishing design as a participatory practice, and not as a decorative art aimed at the elites, as it seems to have been established in the 80s and 90s of the past century. Another important aspect to be mentioned in cultural design is the appropriation we make of traditional material culture, by the designer integrated into a traditional community and by his simultaneously critical and contemporary look in his attempt to redesign, update, translate, communicate common existences as bridges, cultural connections between the place and the visitors, communicated through everyday uses and practices. It is about creating meaning by articulating the vestiges of the past and the experience of reality, actively participating in the reconfiguration of new social identities which distance themselves from the heritage built by the nation-state that promoted fixed meanings in space and time. This is a very sensible point about working with traditional culture and be aware of what is the message that we are communicating. Sometimes it's really a message from the ancient regime, the past, okay? We talk about this better later. Reinscribing or recreating the past also leads to new local opportunities to publicly demonstrate their knowledge, allowing to build the popular memory of artifacts and to maintain a rich cognitive context. Heritage is thus proposed as a matter of contemporary creation, with the aim of opening new perspectives in the encounter with traditional culture and diversifying its meaning. Its new meaning thus becomes inclusive. The preceding historical identity gives way to practices and artifacts to be reinserted into contemporary, diverse, and plural culture and daily life. Concluding, world transformations emerge as evidence that contributed to the artist no longer being a genius far from reality. Beauty is no longer pursued as a goal. Art is no longer independent of society. More and more creators question themselves about contemporary problems and get involved in processes that are simultaneously creative, interdisciplinary, and collective. Contributing to the decolonization of thought and power, art incits curiosity and creativity that allow an openness and availability for the other and leads to a more holistic conception of the world, creating relationships and leading to the construction of the common and the collective. The rural is not new. The rural is not static. The countryside is not disappearing. The rural is a multitude of things and it's dynamic. It may or may not be related to geography. It may be a state of mind, a practice, or a shared identity. It is a term that does not portray anything very precise. The rural and the urban are interdependent, and if the urban has become more populated, it was for political and economical reasons, with industrialization and the establishment of a capitalistic logic and geopolitical strategies that promote the logic of dependency and not the self-subsistence maintained by the rural and indigenous societies. We seek to see the countryside as a shared common space, promoting the vision of a cosmopolitan and dynamic rurality which today is very close to the urban imaginary, as an integrated experience for a global network of collective innovation and sustainable projects. Thank you. Obrigada. Jorgen?
Thanks to Rita and thanks to Julia for this invitation here. I will say a few things about myself. Then I'll go into some ideas about rural change, which links, I hope, very easily to especially your ending theoretical part here, Rita. I hope it will. And then there will be a break, and then we will. Then I'll give examples, many examples, and many slides. And the reason for that is that I'm not completely sure what is of relevance to your project too. But it will enable to stop. I will stop when you like me to stop, and we can go more deep into some of it and skip some of the other. See how it goes. So this is an iconic European landscape in Tuscany, in the Chianti district. It's a very beautiful landscape. It's very rich in history. Cultural history as well as natural history. The landscape looks like it's been there forever, like this, but it has not. 50 years ago, this was a poor place, a marginal landscape. Agriculture was slowly losing economy. People were moving to cities. The area was deserted. And in the background, you can see the forested hill. They were all agriculture at that time. It was abandoned. It was overgrown. Then wine and tourism came in. Then things changed. Now it's a very rich area. It's also an area filled up with social and cultural problems, I would argue. It's a landscape which is depending on landscapers, of workers who doesn't live there anymore. They can't afford living there. And the people who live there are depending not on this economy, but on urban economy. So in the morning, the Mercedes is leaving the landscape and the small Fiat is coming in. So there is an increasing problem between this place as a more or less urbanized living or visiting place for the upper middle class, and then an agricultural production mainly done by people who come from outside. So this is really a problem which you see here. It is extreme, but you see it in many parts of Europe. You see it in parts of Denmark. You see it in parts of France and Portugal and Spain and Italy. But Chile, I think he hits the point here very much. Maybe all the challenges is an exaggeration. I'm not sure all the challenges. But certainly some of them can be met if the local partnerships cooperate and find a way forward and are capable of integrating the different activities present in the region. So it's cooperate and it's integrate here, which are definitely keywords. The alternative, the progressive distancing between new homes and agricultural production constitutes the most serious menace in Chianti. So here we have a problem. It's a social fragmented area now. So that's my starting point. And now we go to a Danish landscape, which is not exactly has exactly the same beauty. Some of the situations are similar. Here we have a typical Danish agricultural landscapes around 1950. We see in the middle to the left, we see the old medieval village around the church. And then we see what we call the cooperative village, which was built in the late 19th century when whole Danish agriculture converted into dairy farming in 10 years. In 10 years, we're talking about fast-changing worlds nowadays. When the silo was invented in the Midwest in Chicago, at the same time as the propeller for the ship, at the same time as the railroad, at the same time as an open market for American grain, when all this happened in the same period, American grain started to float into Europe. It ruined Danish agricultural economy, it ruined Portuguese agricultural economy, it ruined the Dutch agricultural economy. It was really not a good situation for agriculture in Europe, in Western Europe. Also, there came also grain in from Russia at that time. So some is talking about this as the first phase of globalization. Just because of another set of coincidences, the Danish agriculture was able to adapt in 10 years. When you convert from agriculture from grain export and beef export into dairy, you need a very fine road system. Because it's not a problem to transport grain out of Danish landscapes in August when the soil is dry. You can easily go over the fields with the grain and to the harbor and then ship it away. But milk has to be collected every day. So that's not possible in the winter time. You need roads. So they built the whole binary road system in 10 years. They built 10,000 cooperative dairies in 10 years. This was a very poor country here. We're talking about one of the poorest countries in Europe. And this was the start of, you can say, a better economy. So we have this cooperative around there. There was a dairy in the village. There was a cooperative, you can say, a warehouse where people were buying stuff. So this was the situation here in the 1950s. Everything was about agriculture. Everybody worked in agriculture or for agriculture. There was not really any commuting. At this time, in 48, there could be 2 cars in the village. I would say that's probably maybe 3, not more than that. And there were 20 kilometers to the nearest town. So people were not able to commute. It was an integrated community in the sense that it was the same culture. It was an agrarian culture. So when we are doing landscape strategies, and start the first meeting, I'm standing here. I'm coming from the University of Copenhagen, and I'm looking at these faces there, and they look at me, and they're sitting like this, and they think, what the hell is this guy doing here? How can he help us? Then I tell them this story, and then which they knew very well, but then I say, this integrated community automatically made projects, produced projects. They didn't call them projects, but they were projects. They were collective initiatives. It was not something they talked about, it was something they just did. Now it's the opposite. Now it's a fragmented community. It's the projects which produce the community, not the other way around. Without projects, no community. And they actually know that in a way, in the sense they know it. This is why they're sitting there in the first place anyway. But maybe they haven't heard it in this way. Okay. I think you should also count the numbers of in the middle here in the center. If you count the number of fields, you see there are 10 different fields. So the farm here, and this is a typical farm. The farm here is a multifunctional farm. At that time, it would have dairy cattle. That would be the most important. It would also have pigs, hens, has a great variety of crops. It's multifunctional. The landscape is monofunctional. It's about agriculture, nothing else. There's nothing about nature conservation here. There's nothing about outdoor recreation. These people don't need recreation. They go and walk every day. They don't need to go for a walk at night. And this is how it looks today. Now there is one field in the center. But now there are 3 villages. There is the old medieval one, there is the cooperative, and then there is the suburban village. Most people nowadays, they don't work for agriculture. It's very few. They work in the city. They commute. They go out in the morning, drive to a working place in the city, and they live out here because they want to live in the countryside. It's a decision they have made. Maybe they bought a house here because they can get a better house for the same money than they could in the city. Maybe they didn't want to live in the city. Maybe they want to be out in the country. When they come back from work at night, they've been sitting, most of them, in offices, and they want to go for a walk, but there's no places to walk. They can walk to the sea in 10 minutes, but there's no walking paths. So what are they doing? They talk to the municipality. They also talk to each other and said, we need to do something with that. They also think that the village could be in a much better shape. So they are renewing the village together with the municipality, and sometimes with support from the municipality. These people are also more interested in nature than their parents and grandparents were. So they're doing something with the green area in the middle, and the society in general have designated the whole coastline as Natura 2000, the top priority nature conservation areas in Europe. So now the landscape is becoming multifunctional. Agriculture, on the other side, is becoming monofunctional. This is the same farm. And this is now an organic dairy farm. They produce milk, nothing else. They produce a great deal of the fodder themselves because otherwise it cannot be organic. But they don't have pigs, they don't have hens. They have only a small number of crops for their fodder, and that's it. Okay, now we zoom out a little bit. Now you can see a modern pig farm there, and you see a little older pig farm there. But we zoom in on this farm here, this dairy farm, and then we ask the question: what is the relationship with this farm and the rest of the world? If you ask the farmer, do you cooperate with your neighbors? We have asked that question many times, and most, 19 out of 20, the farmer will say, no, I don't collaborate with my neighbors in my production. There could be some agreement with extra manure or something like that, but nothing else. There's no really collaboration in the production. The farms are individualized businesses here. So the relationship with the rest of the world is very vertical. Some feedstuff and other inputs are bought. Then milk is produced, and then it's sold to a large cooperative dairy, a multinational dairy, and then it's instantly linked to the world market very efficiently. It's a vertical network mainly. Of course, they also have their production of feedstuff themselves, and they also have some impacts. This type of space here is the space of flows, characterized by Manuel Castells in his great book about the rising of the network society. So the relationship with this farm in terms of production is not territorial very much. Of course, they have its own land, but it's not really linked to other people there. But then you can ask the farmer, do you collaborate with your neighbors at all? If you ask that question, he will look at you and think you are very stupid. Of course I am, he will say. He will tell you, my children are playing with my neighbor's children. My wife, she's in the board of the city hall. I'm active in the local sports club. Of course I have a lot of relations with my neighbors and with the community. But this is another type of space. This is space of place. This is the place you are attached to, where you live. Can also be a place you are visiting. There could be a few, not in this, but in other villages there will be second homes. So they are attached to the place as visitors, you can say. These two concepts of space are both important. If you have a landscape where the space of flows doesn't really work, then you most likely have a problem in economics. Can also be a problem in other terms. Can also be cultural and socially problems. And if you have a space which doesn't work as a space of place, nobody wants to live there, or few people wants to live there. Because the new thing, that's a very important thing, that's also everywhere. People are not linked to the living places the same way they were before. If the place is not a good living place, these people will move out. They'll sell their houses. And this is the nightmare. Because this is where people have most of their economy linked there, most of their assets. That's linked to their house. So a nightmare here is that people suddenly start to move fast out and the prices go down. So they have an interest in maintaining this space of place. Of course, they also have a more fundamental interest. This is where they live their lives anyway. It's not only about money, of course not. So this is the starting point. Many cultural landscapes are outdated. They do not support the current functions. They do not support, you can say, recreation, biodiversity, the place as a living place, the place as a visiting place. On new interest, I claim rights to the rural landscape, and existing one may be under pressure, especially agriculture. And maybe there is often a need for agriculture either to broaden, to diversify, or to deepen, to make more valuable products in order to raise the economy. And wicked problem, they dominate often these situations. Yeah. A little bit on wicked problems, very fast. When I wrote this, I realized that I was talking to design students. And of course, this is maybe different. But in planning and also in environmental management and in geography and many other disciplines, wicked problems everybody talks about wicked problems like they're something very new. The concept is not very new. It was developed actually by Melvin Weber and Rita Weber. They characterized, and they were planning professors in the Berkeley School in Berkeley, University of Berkeley, teaching in spatial planning. And they characterized wicked problems as problems which are not easy to define. They have no obvious or definite solution. They are associated with solutions which can be good or bad, but they cannot be right or wrong. There's no optimum. This was actually something they did against old-fashioned rational planning. Said rational planning cannot cope with wicked problems. So that was the main thing. Wicked problem is also characterized by being unique, and it can easily be linked to some other problem if you look at it, if you analyze it, and they can be described in numerous ways. But I think for design students, this cannot be anything new, I'm sure. This is what design students are working with, wicked problems all the time. For planners, this was new in the late 1960s, and for environmental managers, and you can say rural economists, this is probably new now. The way that the discipline of economics is developing is clearly this way, to be able to cope with wicked problems. And collaboration, collective things, also many of the things Rita was talking about in the end is part of this. Okay, then what about policies, public policies? If we look at rural areas, rural landscapes, I would argue there are two main agendas, main worldwide agendas in public policy. There is the market policy agenda, which has been transformed dramatically the last 100 years. Dramatically. It's been centralized to a degree that it's almost difficult to understand. Most of the problems related to market policy are dealt with in Brussels, in Europe. They are not dealt with in Lisboa or in Copenhagen or anywhere, or even more local. It's done in Brussels nowadays. So it's an extremely centralized situation. There is also the World Trade Organization, but that's losing power, has lost power a lot the last 5 years. The US is going out of, in practice, they're going out of World Trade Organization. So it used to be very powerful, but it's not anymore. And so the centralized situation here is extremely important. So when they make decisions in Brussels concerning the market, it's not possible for them to think about local rural areas. They don't think about that. The distance is too far. And then you have the sustainability agenda, which is a new agenda compared to the market policy agenda, which is as old as communities. There was market policy for the Greek city-states. Everything was detailed. The market was regulated very detailed. And it's been the same situation for the medieval city. The medieval city was regulated completely with the market. It was decided who could sell in Denmark, it was decided where farmers which city they could go to. They could not choose. They had to go to certain cities, to the market, to sell their products. So this is an old agenda, this is new. 100 years ago, very few people worked in this agenda worldwide. Very few. Denmark, maybe a couple of handful 100 years ago, maybe even just one handful. Now there are worldwide millions of people occupied in the sustainability agenda. And this agenda is active on all scales, from the United Nations down to the municipalities, or sometimes lower than that. And there is some kind of correspondence between the different levels. You can easily find dysfunctional characteristics here, but still it's not completely centralized. And then what we have seen recently are some more local attempts to integrate the agri-environmental schemes. We see the rural development programs, which is, at least within the European Union, can be seen as attempts to bridge these two agendas. And now climate and agri-climate policies is growing fast now. More and more agricultural policies which belongs to here, is dealing with climate, which belongs to here. They have to find ways to work. And the same for heritage, for architectural heritage, for other types of heritage. So we see attempts to integrate, but it's not so easy. And what makes it even more difficult is that the money is coming from here, but the goals are coming from there. And when the goals are formulated, in another context than the money, then things get still, because there are some real goals here which they don't talk about. So in Denmark, when they designed the rural program, the rural policy, it's the Ministry of Agriculture. And who is the first policy and the most important target in the Ministry of Agriculture? These are the farmers. It's not necessarily the environment, not necessarily the climate. So there are some problems here. But more fundamentally, there are some problems which are much more serious. And that is that these type of spaces don't really overlap. This is about spatial flows. This is what it's all about. This is about spatial place, and the two agendas, they meet in the local landscape. They will meet there. There's no escape. They're forced to meet there. But they quite often meet in the farm at the farm level, and then they think that the farmer, he can integrate them, which he cannot. He cannot integrate what they couldn't integrate on the upper level. That's a naive thing. Especially the individual farmer cannot integrate this, because many of the problems are not related to the farm level, but to the landscape level. Or globally, the climate cannot be solved by individual decisions. Okay, this was another type. Now I'll do a little fast here. This is about the conditions for agriculture. They can be marginal or they can be good. This is about the degree of urbanization. You can have urban centers to the right, or you can have very peripheral rural areas to the left. And this gives very different landscapes. And if you are on the upper side, with good conditions for agriculture, especially on the left upper side, you will expect more intensification in the future. This is what is going on. If you are here, you can expect more marginalization, even abandonment of agriculture in many places, because there's no economy in it. When you go closer to the city, it becomes more difficult, because then the developments are intersecting with urbanization. And then things becomes much more complicated. And when we do local studies, we see that there is also marginalization the closer of agriculture, the closer you get to here. But we have tried in a serious study to demonstrate that on a European scale, but we couldn't. And then we found out it's because of the statistics. This is of the European statistics. A long story, and I'm not going into that. But my point here is that landscape governance has to be very different. You have to deal with landscape conservation and landscape change, landscape innovation very differently in the different parts of this scheme here. So governance of rural landscapes is inadequate. It's too uncoordinated. It's not enough development. There's not enough change-oriented or development-oriented. This is another thing when we are standing there and looking at the farmers in the first part. We say to farmers, this is not about conserving everything. It's about developing the landscape, developing the community. And this is what they like to hear much more than if we were sitting here. Now we want to protect and protect and protect and protect. So we use this phrase that we protect through development. It's about integration. There is too much not in my backyard responses to existing planning. This is very clear in wind power or in solar power or in the transitions which is needed for climate change. People certainly agree with the need for transition, but it shouldn't be here, it should be somewhere else. So that's the problem. And the key to this problem, we already know in Denmark, is collaboration. If you are making a windmill park somewhere, you need to put in a bag of money and say, if you will accept the windmill park, we will give you this money to make this a better place anyway. And that works. So we need new approaches. They have to be coordinated, they have to give direction. We have to integrate different interests, and we have to include people from the very beginning. A little bit about the main actors here, besides the experts, besides people like you and me. So we have the primary manager of the landscape, that's the farmer and the forester and other major landowners. Here in Portugal, you also have many foundations which are landowners, which are of course then also a major actor here. Then you have the public agency at different levels, municipal. Sometimes it's the municipal level which is the most important. Sometimes it's the regional. It varies. In Denmark, it's the municipal. Our municipalities are big, are large. We only have 100 municipalities. And then we have the local community. Now the question is, what are the relationships here? The typical, not all, it's not black and white, it's schematic, but this is about conflict management, very typically. So the municipality or the region is regulating the farmer in order to cope with conflicts. It can be conflicts between the interest of the farmer and the interest of the community. It could also be conflicts between two farmers, between private. It can also be conflicts between now and 50 years from now, between generations, you could say. And it can be conflicts between what is locally of interest and what is regionally of interest. So it's different types of conflicts, but it's mainly a relationship between the public agency and the land manager, which you regulate. And there's a lot of planning, spatial planning, which is only dealing with the conflict management part. And that's not working very well. Planning is more than conflict management, it's also placemaking. And then, of course, this is local collaboration. This local collaboration which creates the communities. And they can have very different forms. It can be a local village or village association, but it can also be a local association of farmers, or it can be a local association of nature conservationists. Very different forms. They are driven by co-determination. We want to do things together. They are driven by self-determination. And then the development of the landscape is the main relationship here. It's placemaking. It's making this a better place. This is not something you do with the individuals. This is something you do with the community. And if you don't have a community, you need one. I think this is one of the last ones here. Then we'll take a break. So Hägerstrand, Thorsten Hägerstrand is a famous Swedish geographer who became very famous a long time ago, I think in the early 1960s, by bringing time into geography, bringing the notion of how is geography used in terms of time, how is the individual person using the space during a day, a deep understanding about how the space was used, things like that. That's how he became famous. And then when he was old, in 2001, he wrote a very nice paper talking about competences. And he said that the most important competence in the landscape is the territorial competence. It's the competence to decide, to make decisions concerning farming, concerning forestry, to do the daily work on the land. That's the territorial competence. And this competence is always regulated and has always been regulated to some degree by the public, by people, by persons or institutions who have spatial competences. And then in the paper he wrote very nicely about the difficulties making these two competencies to work nicely together. It's about conflict management, it's about placemaking. Although he doesn't use these concepts, but this is what it's about. And it's a good paper because it's a good analysis, but he's missing one thing, and it really surprised me. I was lucky to meet him once, but after he did this one, I never met him, and he's died now. I said, where is the community here? Because the community has historically been extremely important in when we talk about these competences. Because I mean, a couple of 100 years ago, the village in here and in Denmark, the village was the mediator of the two competences. It was the village who actually mediated these two competences in a lot of cases, because they worked collectively. They worked collectively in the interest of both the individual farmer and of the wider society. So the question, of course, is: Are we now in a situation where the community will have to play a bigger role? And my answer is very clear: yes. This is the situation. It needs to play a bigger role. Otherwise, we cannot cope with the problems. So, a very important paper was published in this journal called NEPAS, the National Proceedings for the Science. I think it's a North American Proceedings for Science. Very, very important journal. And a lot of writers, they published this paper about a landscape approach. 10 principles for reconciling agriculture, conservation, and other competing land uses. And it has been extremely influential because it has come up with very important challenges which can be dealt with if you prepare your policy right. So that gained a lot of interest already from the start. Here is a review which is late 15 years later, which has also been quite influential. And this is one of the big EU projects, which is also making references to the landscape approach afterwards. So there has been a lot of, you can say, innovative developments in the academics to deal with these things I just talked about. The problem is that they're not very clear to how to combine the different approaches, how to bring them to play together. And this is where we come in our group in Copenhagen. We think that collaborative landscape strategy making represents one solution to that problem, how to bring the different elements of the approach together in practice. And this is what I will give examples of after the break. But before the break, I'll just very briefly we work within a framework within an institutional framework where you have the primary landscape manager, his or her own plans and local communities' visions and goals as a starting point, or as a foundation, you can say. Another one on top is of course the laws, the legal infrastructure, and the regional plans. Then there will be a number of different programs in play, many of them EU programs, and then there will be the municipal planning and habitat management and other initiatives from the municipality or regions. So it's done within this. And what we are doing is we have adapted from Paisagist's famous paper about she wrote a very good paper saying what's strategic in strategic planning. And in this paper she suggests that strategic spatial strategies, they have 4 dimensions. You have to build up interest and trust. If there is no interest for the future, common interest for the future in Monchique, well then there is nothing to collaborate about. And if this interest is not there, it must be built up. And I was thinking when I heard Rita's, that this is also where the communication design has a big role to play. Then you have scoping and goal setting. I already told Julia the other day that we usually, again, when we are sitting, first time we are standing over people and we start the process. We use this metaphor that Now you should imagine that we are going for a walk. You have, together with 10 other people, you have agreed on a walk, on a full day walk in a nice place. And you agreed that you will meet on a parking place in the morning, and then you are standing there with a big map. And there's no leader, and you haven't decided where to go. So you start with a cup of coffee and a discussion, where should we go? What is the route and what is the end of our day? So you take a discussion about that, and then you start walking. No, you don't. Because you need another thing also. You need to agree on where you are on the map. And when we work with these rural communities, it's our general experience that it's quite often more difficult to agree on where you are on the map than where you want to go on the map. So you need these discussions. What are the problems? Problem is climate change. No, there is no climate change. This is exaggerated. This is something people in Lisbon or Copenhagen has invented. There is no climate change. Well, you got to agree that there is a problem in climate change. Otherwise, it's waste of time to start collaborating. So this can be quite time-consuming. Mobilizing resources, it's about mobilizing ideas, it's about mobilizing knowledge. It can also be about mobilizing available material resources. An empty building which is not used for anything anymore. A former bridge which was used for cattle to go over a small river, but there's no cattle anymore maybe, and the bridge is just there. It can be used for recreation maybe. So it's also about mobilizing material resources. And it's about framing. When people are participating in these things collectively, they have a hinterland. They have a basis. And they have to go back to the basis to convince their friends and fellows that this is a good thing. In order to do that, it has to be framed in a convincing way. And then the last thing is prioritization. This is the strategic part. You can produce a strategy, but you cannot produce a strategy which has 100 different projects. So these are the projects, these are ideas, this is not a strategy. You have to prioritize maybe 5 projects, 4 projects, 6 projects. From 2 criteria. There should be a very high probability that they can be implemented. They should be realistic. And there should also be a high possibility that they will start a positive circle of development, that they are starting something which takes other things with them. These could be 2 good criteria to make these products. So this is the dimension. This is the product. A strategy which has visions and objectives, a plan. The plan is mainly a concretization of the goals. So how do you make coherency in the recreational route or in the biodiversity, sometimes also in the farm production? Or how do you identify priority areas for conservation, but maybe also for you can say for restoration or for improvement? And then there are the priority projects. We call them strategic projects. So this is engaging and mobilization, collaboration and framing and priority. So this is the last one. And this is a little bit about we're going into these as researchers. And we bring in our experiences and our knowledge, our resources, and then we participate. So when we have done the projects, we don't need to go out and interview planners, which I did for 10 years, or more than that, maybe 20 years, interviewing farmers and planners and policymakers to find out what was going on, what's happened here. I don't have to do that because I was there. I was sitting in the room when the conflict started. So I learned 15 years ago that this is much more effective way of doing research. Being there, participating there. We call it action research. And coming out, we can contribute to to academics in different ways. We are participating in sometimes, and there will be a few examples afterward, in producing paradigmatic cases which becomes famous and which other parts of the world is learning from, and that's the most important part. But designers know all about that. They know all about the power of the example. But when I talk to geographers or biologists, they don't know about the power of the example. It's also contributing to methods. It's contributing to theory. And these are the projects we have been involved in the last 20 years. And you see the three big ones. I'll talk about two of them after the break. These are on a regional scale. We always had the goal that you need a critical mass of examples. And when you have a critical mass of examples, we don't need to be there anymore. Things are going by themselves. And then we can retire and move to Algarve, all of us, and have a good life. But and this was pretty much also our strategy to stop this type of research. But then we realized that we have never worked on a regional scale, and that's completely different. So we are now involved in 3 regional projects, which one of them has just finished, and I'll use some time after the break on that one, but also on 6 other examples. And I didn't look at my clock. I'm very sorry about that. Because I was supposed to talk half an hour, and maybe I talked maybe 3/4 of an hour. I'm sorry. No. So this was the first part, and then the examples will come after that. So I don't know if there are things you would like to discuss or talk about. We can take it now. We can take it after the break. It's up to you.
Maybe it would be good just to take a short time to see if there are some questions now directly related to what you.
Fine.
And then when you go to the examples, will you pick up on these concepts?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
So that
Definitely.
we can see in practice how these are tools for
Yeah.
understanding.
Definitely.
Are there any questions? How long change is the process?
I have one. With the examples that you have through the years, have you found like a pattern or different patterns for the same solution, or are there like different solutions for every single case?
No, there's always some kind of common patterns. There will always be. I mean, there are certain ways to deal with the coherency in the landscape, for instance. So you'll see in many of our solutions, you'll see different types of landscape corridors being dealt with. That's a type of a pattern. There's also patterns in the way that visions are formulated. You can find patterns in that, and you can find. You can also find patterns in the projects which gets priority. Recreational projects very often get priority, and it's very often about linking. You can say existing systems which are not linked. That you have a local walking path system here and a local walking path, but they're not connected. The walking path opportunities in my country, in Denmark, in Northern Europe, and many other northern, is far behind Portugal. Portugal offers much better opportunities for walking than Denmark does. Maybe not in the urban fringe. Maybe not in the interface between the rural and the urban, but out in the landscapes I know here, there is usually very good opportunities. But so that's the pattern about recreation. It can also be in terms of biodiversity conservation, there are different patterns coming out.
So we take a coffee and then we come back.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for this change of settings. I'll be very quick on these presentation of these programs. They are new. They are called, as you can see, the, let's say, planning and management of the landscape. It all began after a big fire in the Monchique, in the area that you know well. You can see here that the image was seen from the satellites. It was in 2018, a big fire that was menacing the city council itself. And the year before, 2017, the Portuguese may remember, the big fire in Pedrógão that killed 66 people. So the government were kind of, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this forest, with this climate change? What are the solutions? The solutions cannot only be firemen. So the solution must be, how can we change the process? How can we change what they call the land, and then begin to call the landscape? So this is very quickly. You can see the area that was burned, the area that is now in this more pale color. But interesting, when the fire is big, everything is burned. So we heard sometimes that if you use this kind of landscape design, this landscape design can hold the fire. What we saw, nothing can hold the fire. When the fire is very strong, when the winds are very strong, everything burns. So these are the land used before the fire, and these are what was burned. As you can see, it's more or less the same thing. Okay, so basically the lesson is, when it burns everything. Okay, so you have to, with this in mind, as Jorgen said, it's difficult more to agree where we are than the path to follow. This was important to understand this.
But there was an intervention, a landscape intervention in between?
No. This is what was there prior to the fire, and this is what was burned in the fire. So this is, as you can see, more or less the same percentage that was in the pre-fire was what the fire consumed, for instance. So this is to prove that when the fire is big, everything burns. The temperatures are so high in these kind of landscapes, or let's say in this kind of topography, okay, which is a very strong topography. Okay, so it's difficult to fight. Okay, so the idea, the Ministry of Environment called us to try to devise a new, let's say, an official way of thinking about how we could change this problem. So the idea was to connect 4, let's say, basic squares. Begin here, the physical aptitude of the land, the traditional, what are the soils, what are the slopes, what is the climate, the more physical approach to understand what are the aptitudes of the land. Then to study the ecosystem services. Then with both introduce how we could, on a landscape level, to create more resilience to the big fires, and with all of these to create a local economy. So this means that we were trying to find at the same time what is the physical or biophysical aptitudes and the economic aptitudes, and then to cross them together. And this created a huge discussion, because needed to change the landscape and need to change the economy, and the economy here is basically made of eucalyptus. Okay, so the area was more or less 25,000 hectares, so it's a regional scale with 2 municipalities, Monchique and Silves. The process was made in 2 let's say, at the same time, two levels of approach, a more technical and a more social approach. Here we discussed with what we call stakeholders, with relevant stakeholders from municipalities, from farming, from local organization of producers, from tourism, well, people that were interested to discuss this approach to planning and economy, ecosystem services. And at the same time, we were producing field visits and producing GIS information, you know, more traditional. So, but these two processes were more or less on the same time, let's say a co-design approach. For us, it's important that we took a landscape approach. I'm a landscape architect by education. And then I also made a PhD here in urbanism, but basically I'm a landscape architect. And so for us, the identity is very important. Identity and landscape, it's what, let's say, makes the difference between what is a unit and that is a unit. And for us, one famous important word is character. It's like persons, which is the character of a person, which is that person is not good or bad, but what are their characteristics, their well, the way of being. And in landscape is the same. So we begin to study and to create local landscape units. I had another presentation, but it was longer. I put this shorter one, but in the longer, I also speak about the 128 landscape units that we have in Portugal. Okay, so we have a work that you can go online and see if you go for Atlas das Paisagens Portuguesas. You can download that information and you see that we have in Portugal 128 different landscape units when that work was done in 25 years ago. If probably when that work will be done in the next 25 years, I would assume that in those 50 years, from the year 2000 to probably the year 2050, probably when the work is redone, from 128 landscape units, I imagine that you're going to have half. Okay, Portugal is becoming a much less colorful place in terms of characteristics of the landscape. We are becoming a little bit more monotonous. Okay, but we studied that and we proposed management rules. We proposed also a different approach. Instead of making a plan and going and see what's going on the drawing, we propose an approach based on a mental framework, almost an algorithm. Okay, so you don't need a map. You don't need a map. You don't need to amplify a map that sometimes is made in a GIS in a scale with very few information. And then you go to the site, and if you have a big screen and a small piece of land, you put that on 1:1 and you take decisions that are not correct. I don't know if I make this clear, but this is very important in planning. Okay, so maps are good until the objectives and the scale that they are produced are good. Okay, if we are producing objectives, let's say for a 125,000 scale, then we cannot put that scale to 1:1 and make decisions on that. So we have to make a framework. So we decide a framework based on slopes, basically here on slopes, on soils, and with pedology, and in exposition of slopes. These three very basic situations that we can measure on site gave us a matrix for what could be interesting from a biophysical aptitude and from an economic point of view. So this, I don't take too much time with this. So we also design, we create some, let's say, design for the patterns of the things that we thought. This is about fire. I'll go through, but one important. Yes, what's happened is. Okay. What's happened is this is linked with the recurrence of the fires that are linked with the wind regimes of those areas. And there are areas that we need to act urgently in order to stop the fires. Urgently, it was kind of first aid, okay? And then there was space that we can take more time. So there was space of urgency and space of opportunity. So this is basically to think about two ways of approaching the areas of urgency are most of the areas that are not burned yet, but could be burned anytime if they don't do nothing immediately. The areas of opportunity are most of the areas that were already burnt, and now we have the opportunity to change the landscape.
It's an opportunity for us also because they are less dangerous and they are so expecting new situations.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so this is a map for what can be done in terms of the, let's say, fight against the fire. But the most important is what we think are the opportunities. I'll go through this very shortly. This is the approach that I mentioned about ecosystem services. Okay, just to give you an idea, this is written like this is to be read like this. Okay, so this is prior to the fire, after the fire, and with implementation of the plan. Okay, so basically most or all the ecosystem services. This was done by colleagues from the University of Nova, people that are specialists on these calculations. And so they have calculated from these ecosystem services, well, the traditional ecosystem services. This is pre-fire, after the fire. And this green, same colors, yes. This the green with the implementation of the proposal. Okay, so basically, or they keep the same or they grow. Okay, so the idea is to the ecosystem. This is, for instance, an opportunity. Okay, to create a landscape that is more interesting from an ecosystem service situation than the beginning. And sorry?
You're going to explain how you do that?
I would need a month.
It's not about changing the kind of...
No, but I'll explain. Well, basically, it's on this. Okay, basically, the algorithm helps a lot. Sorry, this takes. Presentation is heavy and takes some time to go through slides. But okay, so you see this. So basically, if you have flat areas, okay, all the flat areas, we don't want trees on that areas. All the flat areas that are below 5%, we want them to be discontinuity areas. We want to introduce open spaces, and means that we want pastures, means that we want goats, or sheep, or hunting, okay? Means that we need herbivores here, okay? So this is the first thing is, wherever you have flat areas, we don't care if it is north, south, east, or west slopes, because they are flat, so also the exposition does not influence so much. If it is flat, or it is near the valley, or it is on the top of the mountain, if it is flat, it's open. It's open. It's to create exactly that kind of discontinuity that is already on the topography. So it's working with the topography. If the topography gives us flat areas, we thanks and say, okay, here we are going to create a discontinuity area. That came from the observation that we made on the fires, not only here, but in other places in Portugal. that when it burns, everything burns, like I've shown in the one of the first slides. But what are important is natural discontinuities. This is a huge discussion because, as you know, Portugal is implementing the artificial discontinuities, what they call the primary pathways to fight the fires. And what we've seen is this zero, has no impact in fires, zero. Fire in Monchique, because it's eucalyptus, and eucalyptus, let's say, they love to burn because they can project, if with a good wind, they can project the fire 10 kilometers away. So it's not 15 meters or 20 meters or 25 meters or 50 meters or 100 meters that stops the fire. So the natural discontinuities, yes, they are good because they can create if possible, in the valleys, a continuum of open areas. Of course, near the water, we want trees, but it's near the water. But in the valleys near the water, the ideal landscape is to have the slopes different, the north, south, east or west, with different approach. Here, north, the cork oak, medronho, the strawberry, I think it's strawberry, the umbrella pine. All of these, they can have economic application. Cork, of course, medronho, which is a fundamental product in Monchique, and the introduction of umbrella pine. For all these, they are interesting for economic reasons. They are on the north slope because they need a little bit more of humidity. Okay. If it is on the south, which is more dry, okay, so we change the cork for the elms, the sobreiro to the azinheira. Okay. If it is on the east, we have ideal conditions to kind of implement a forest that is economically very interesting about the umbrella pine. And if it is on the west, we can kind of replicate west, north, we can more or less replicate what is on the south. But this on these kind of slopes, 5 to 25%, so it's on medium slopes. On higher slopes, depends on the lithology. If we have more schist, we say it's better to use the strawberry tree and then some let's say mixed forest. If it is on the more granite, the strawberry trees does not go as well, and so it's preferable to have these kind of mixed forest and to produce these, for instance, for hunting, for woods, and for honey, and of course for recreational factors. As you can see, in any of these are eucalyptus, and what was there was eucalyptus. So this creates a huge discussion, and eucalyptus company are, of course, saying, this is not going to work. People are not interested. That's why one difference of this plan is that the government pays to change this on a voluntary basis. So the government says, okay, if you grow eucalyptus, so this is not a law. What we thought was not this being a law. What we thought is this being a voluntary scheme, like a business plan, is a voluntary scheme that if people want to create their properties more, let's say, resilient to the fire, more landscape interesting, and receive some money from these activities. But we know that in the beginning, the first capital, people cannot have that capital. So the government pays for the beginning and for 20 years. So it's the first time that we as a country manage to have a plan with a strategy that was, let's say, discussed with local actors. Of course, some of them, like eucalyptus, did not say yes to this, and they are fighting this. Of course, they are on their right. It's okay. It's contradictory interests. Okay. The problem, it's not the companies. The problem is not the companies. The companies, they are good stakeholders. They work well. They have their forest well managed. The problem is the example, because eucalyptus, they give money to the people. And lots of people plant small patches of eucalyptus and with zero management. It's like buying a ticket for the lottery. They put eucalyptus on the land, and it's exactly like buying a ticket from the lottery. And they pray. They pray. If the eucalyptus does not burn in 10 years, by the end of 10 years, they receive some money. If the eucalyptus burn, well, they didn't spend any money there, only to put some eucalyptus in the beginning. And the eucalyptus can, again, regrow from zero. So they have the second choice. So they have the second opportunity. And then they pray again. And if eucalyptus, by chance, burn, then they still have the third time. So it's like buying a ticket of the lottery that's with the same number, you go on 3 rounds. That's what they do. So that is the problem. And we understand that. People don't do this because they want to ruin the world, or people do this because it's an economic opportunity with very few effort to receive income.
Can you say that from their perspective is the most rational choice? You have a piece of land that you must manage in some way. So from their perspective, they think it's the most rational choice.
It's the most rational choice if you don't love your land.
From their perspective, in this
Yes,
moment,
if they are not there, probably in Portugal, most of us are sons or grandsons of farmers. I'm still a farmer, but so most of us have some small patches of land. But we are now teachers and work in the services. So we have our piece of land, but we are not there permanently. So this is a way of let the things grow. You don't have to be there. You don't have to do nothing. You can spend years without going to your land. In 10 years, you go there. 10 years. You only need to go there once in 10 years, is to see if your trees are good to be cut. And if your trees are good to be cut, you go to the local cafe and say, oh, I have my trees. Who's buying the eucalyptus here? Ah, that guy. Oh, so you want to go there? Yes, let's go. How much? 100, 1,000, whatever. Okay. You shake hands and that's it. And then you receive the money, and then for 10 other years, you don't have to go there again, because eucalyptus will regrow again. So it's I don't know if it is rational, but it's model. So this is a model of work. This is a model of to do any of those things, you have to be there. You have to take the cork out. You have to collect the umbrella pines. You have to manage the goats or the sheep or whatever. You have to make the honey. You have to produce the aguardente. So this is also a social approach to the landscape.
So we can say that the Monchique is going, this certification is growing also because of eucalyptus, because suddenly they don't have to be in the land, in the hills, taking care of their cultivations.
Mm-hmm.
They just abandon the fields,
Yeah.
planting eucalyptus and go to the city.
Yes, you see? See but everything burns, okay? Everything burns. But the biggest area in Monchique was forest. Okay. And we know. Yes, we want. It's not in fact agriculture, because on those, like Jorgen showed, that good place, bad place, urbanization, we are not in good agricultural land. We cannot go on agriculture. The places for agriculture are very small, but they are very important. Let me move on now. For animals, yes, wonderful. And don't forget, in Mediterranean ecosystems, I don't have here the trophic ecosystem in Mediterranean, but you have lots of primary producers, plants, but then you have lots of herbivores. You have from the rabbit to the deer.
And they eat the trash, the bracken.
Yes, yeah, yes, in Mediterranean situations, in a, let's say in a more natural systems, we have the rabbits, we have the hares, as lebres, we have the birds, the partridges, and then we have two very interesting, or three interesting herbivores. The goat, the wild goat, the cabra, the wild goat, which is now in a human-induced landscape. It's the goat, the goat with shepherds, the traditional herds that we have. We have the corso. I cannot say that in English, but I think it's not. I think it's roe deer. It's a deer that is small, roe, and then we have the big deer, and then we have the ugamo, and we have another kind of deer. Yes. So we had lots of herbivores in our ecosystems. That's why then we had the wolves and everything. So everything now is changed. From that pyramid, from that, let's say, ideal pyramid of trophic levels in the Mediterranean ecosystem, everything is unbalanced. And so what we have is eucalyptus and fires, eucalyptus and fires, eucalyptus and fires. So if we want to continue with this model with eucalyptus and fires and chants, so we have 3 points: eucalyptus, chants, and fires. You might have the chance of not having a fire, and then you sell eucalyptus. But you might have the chance of having a fire, and then everything burns, including sometimes the villages. Here, there was no people that was dead, but the other year in 2017, 66 people died. We know it was in the road, but most of them were in the road, but it was direct victims of the fire. So we have to, if you want to change this, and sorry, there is another one point. We don't have real numbers about this, but we think that it's much more cheaper to pay farmers than to pay firemen. But we don't have this formal, this is what we feel, but we don't have. But I would say give money to farmers. Give, just give. Say to farmers, you don't need to comply with almost nothing, okay? Let's give you money. It's not new. The common agricultural policy, Jorgen was saying about those two things, those two levels, the level of the commercial approach and sustainable approach. The commercial approach gives money to people just for holding land. If I'm a farmer, but I'm a small farmer. So I cannot live out of money that they gave us because it's peanuts, it's zero, almost zero. But if I was a big landowner, I could live only for having land. Here they pay 80 euros per hectare per year. So if you inherited 2,000 hectares, and some properties in Portugal, they have more than that, you receive more than 10,000 years, more or less, euros per month. It's good. Per month. It's not per month. You receive once. But if you divide that money that you receive per month, gives you 10 months. You know how much we receive here as teachers. So advice, try to find someone that has 2,000 hectares and marry them or do something.
It's really important for us because we can act culturally, because I know there's living in Monchique, so
yes,
they want
yes,
to
yes.
produce wool,
Yeah.
but they don't have cheese tradition.
Yes.
For example, there's no cheese tradition
Yeah.
in the
No.
Algarve.
No.
But maybe with foreigners or
No.
we can introduce that.
The
Cross interests.
the question is what Jorgen said. You have to set an example. You have to be there. That's why I'm a farmer. I'm trying to produce an example in my landscape unit, but I cannot be in all. So, but you have to go there, not just to tell them create goats. You have to go there and create your goats yourself and stay there for the next 50 years. Exactly, unless, or to find someone, I don't know here, but we are also studying a nearby land, which is Caldeirão, Serra do Caldeirão. So there are two basic mountains in the Algarve. One is Monchique, and the other is Caldeirão. We already studied Monchique, and now we are studying the other one, Caldeirão. So Caldeirão is much more tradition of goats. But people are selling the goats because
I know you need to finish now. I was just thinking there was an accent on like subsidies for people who own the land and less for people who use the land.
Exactly.
But what you're proposing goes more into this.
You have to pay. So the idea, for instance, here you see this is very traditional and this is fundamental. We organized our ideas in three basic, let's say, examples using the expression. So we said, okay, priorities, rivers, and to plant near the rivers. Why? Because the slopes are very steep. With the rain, all the soil will go down to the rivers. If at least we have something that holds the soil prior to the soil goes to the river, we can create there some fertility differential, positive differential of the soil near the river. So first, this is kind of managing space, time, people, and money more or less at the same time, and focus on the basic, what was discussed. We proposed and people said yes, so it was good. On the three basic priority interventions. The linear forest near the rivers, the wood chips, because if you let the woods on the slopes, they pose a problem for security because they roll down and then can create more erosion, but it can also become fuel for the next fire. And at the same time, we need to wood chip the logs and to kind of create a more organic matter to recover the slopes, you see? So this is easy with this kind of machine, the shredder. You just put the logs and it picks this wooden material. And then, that's why this is to link with your question, to rehabilitate as soon as possible these fundamental landscape features that what they call os canteiros. I cannot translate that, but it's the local expression for this is canteiros. So canteiros, it's fundamental. We made through aerial photography and the field, we made a mapping of all the canteiros that are there. And this is fundamental. GIS is very good because we can map things and we can measure things and we can put numbers to go to a political discussion. Okay, and said we have how many hundreds hectares of these. How do you know? Here you can see. So it's not I think that it's here. So we map them all, and this is now a priority payment. If people want to go here and to receive money for something, this is a fundamental action. And the municipality is already working with the agrarian school to reutilize this for limões, to create, you know the limoncello in Italy. So they want to create a Monticello or something like that. Okay, so they want to rehabilitate a local variety of lemons on these landscapes because these were normally as you see, here we don't have soil, okay, so this is forest. But not the eucalyptus forest, but for instance, here you can see some of them, or most of them, are not eucalyptus. They were corks. They also burn. That's what I mentioned. When the fire is very strong, everything burns, even cork. People say, if you plant corks, that doesn't burn. Yes, it burns. Yes, it burns. Yes, it burns. The idea is to create what we call a patchwork of the landscape with different approaches. Corks, pine trees, pastures, recuperation or rehabilitation of these, but basically to put people there. The landscapes did not burn 50 years ago because there was a lot of people there taking out the organic matter. They were creating a cycle. We don't have that cycle anymore. So the idea is to try to see how we can create that cycle again. But the government, we know, everybody knows that this is not nowadays easy. So that's why they pay. They say, do this. So it's paying for the creation of a new landscape. Okay. We also propose 2 pilot areas. I'm not going through this, so this is the cycle. Just to finish with this, which is also an interesting situation for Monchique. Because of the things that work here, the government turned this into a national program. So Monchique is the cradle of the national program for landscape transformation, what we call in Portuguese PTP, Programa de Transformação da Paisagem, which is isto é RCM, this in Portuguese means Resolução do Conselho de Ministros. Okay, so the ministers, the council of the ministers, all the ministers agreed in 2022, so last year, to create this PTP according to what was created in Monchique. So Monchique was, let's say, the beginning of what is now a program of Portugal. And that program has basically 3, there are more, but just 3 basic process. One is the plans. So we've made the plan for Monchique, we've made the plan for here, this region, and now we are making the plan for here, and the other teams, other technical teams with universities and whatever, are making the plans for these green areas, and these open are the ones that will be next. Okay, so these are the plans, the regional plans. But the plans then go through the what they call the áreas integradas. So these are the, okay, the plan is big, but then you have to go to set examples. You have to go down a more small scale to make the implementation, to see how that can be done. And that is done through the operations. So plan is the regional approach, area is the local approach, and operation is exactly what Jorgen said, the implementation, involving the landscape strategy, the partnership, everything. So this is the global approach. So that they now have a national program that go through regional plans, that go through local areas, and then go through operations. And this with money. And this is interesting because this is the one of the most well-known papers, newspapers in Portugal, Público. And Público is now paying attention to this and call this a silent revolution. They say in the forest, but in fact is in the landscape. So Monchique also was the beginning of this contribution. That's it. Thank you. So goodbye. Sorry to live like this, but I didn't knew that it's. But it was very interesting, and I would love to. Well. Okay. Nada. Obrigado. Sorry to be so quick. I felt that it was not very well explained, but.
Mas eu estava não sabia de todo quais é que eram as soluções que estavam em cima da mesa para Monchique. E de facto vai ao encontro da chamada população, um Nós vemos também a desertificação
Yeah.
e o estabelecimento de novos
Yeah.
interesses para fixar.
Yeah. When the problem that this as I was telling to Jorgen is bureaucracy. We must be very careful because bureaucracy is this began as a innovative approach to the landscape, then began to be a national plan, then it's 100 papers to be, So a good idea rapidly turns into thousands of papers to people to write and to receive money. But we know that's like this in, I'd say, most of Latin countries. We like to have lots of papers, but we need a much more operational approach, which means to don't be afraid of the other people. We have so many papers because people are afraid. People are afraid to appear on TV. You have seen on the last month how many ministers and secretary of states lose their jobs because they appear on TV. It's only because of that. They appear on TV, and so so TV, the paperwork, and people are very afraid, so they are saying, oh, it's better to say no than say yes. We need to, I think that we as teachers, we need to give this young generation the confidence to say yes. Let's go.
These plans also mean that the CPO have access to a lot of financial support for new projects or...
Yeah. The municipality is organizing one of those areas. Yes, the municipality is organizing when they are creating one of those, remember the plans, areas and the operations. So the plan is done. The municipality is organizing an area that we proposed on the plan, so it's already checked. So they are now organizing the implementation to the municipality to be kind of a driver of the transformation of the landscape in a municipality-driven process. We work with the former mayor.
Yeah, we did too.
So this mayor... Yes, so this mayor, we just had a very sympathetic contact, a phone, but it was from that. But we worked a lot with. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, keep in touch and hope you have a good work. It is fundamental.
Yeah, we just had a very good example of a wicked problem which needs collaboration and so there is no difference between this example we just heard and the examples I am showing here, except that the landscapes are different and the challenges, the problems are different. But they represent wicked problems which are not easily defined, and there is not just one clear solution. There are many solutions, and some are good and some are not good, but none is wrong or right. And I'll try to think which examples could be the most relevant, and I'll skip the others. And there are different points in the different examples, so you'll forgive me that I'm going very fast through some slides, and in order to come to the points. This is one example. This is an island in the Baltic Sea. In between Sweden and Poland and Germany, north, south, and west is Denmark, and east is Russia. And right in the middle there is a big island called Bornholm. Bornholm is a wonderful, it's a well-known place. It's a Danish Tuscany, you could say, that it's famous for its beauty and the values and the unique types of architecture and things like that. It's also a place which is, and historically, it's also important because it's located very strategically in the middle of the Baltic Sea. The Russians came after World War II and they didn't want to leave. Eventually they left. But historically it's also been very strategic. The area is characterized by desertification, social desertification. People are leaving the island. There's not enough jobs. especially not for young people, they leave the island. And there has been a lot of projects like this. Small types of interventions to make places for tourists, for visitors, and for people who live there. And there's been a lot of design innovation related to this. And the money for these things are coming from we have great charity foundations in Denmark, which are big and large. So there has not really been lack of money for projects like this. The problem is that they are single individual projects and they don't go together, they don't play together. So we went in and were trying to make a project for the northern part together with the different types of stakeholders. You see, this is the island, this is the northern part. This is the essence of the strategy. I'm not going into that. What I'm going into is that in close to the end, we had students over there. We had a course running there. And then some students, they proposed what they called Bornholm's Green Wave. They saw the skeleton to a pattern of a green corridor through the whole of Bornholm. Could improve biodiversity conditions very much. It could create new recreational opportunities. And it could also solve another problem, is that the tourist development was located along the coast, not in the middle. Here you could bring the tourists into the middle through a green corridor like this. It's a huge project. It's running now. And there will be a green corridor, 40 kilometers long. And the intensively farmed area will stop farming and there will come natural habitats in it. So it's a good example of an ecological corridor which will be realized. There is so much momentum in it now. So many stakeholders have been mobilized, that this will happen. And when you are reaching that point, you are pretty much done your work. The point to make here is that this idea came out of another project of a student. This was a student suggestion, and it was such an obvious and appealing idea that everybody agreed on it and everybody bought the idea. So that was born from an idea. This is completely different. In Denmark, you have had this tradition of shelter belts on the sandy soils, where you wanted to prevent for wind erosion of soil. You plant shelter belts. You have done that for 100 years, and it's done through associations, and EU will support it. A little bit like the situation with the wild. But the point here is that there was an association with 240 local groups. So it was all over the country, not only on sandy soils anymore. And they planted about 1,000 kilometers of hedgerows every year. And mainly 3 roads, sometimes 5 roads, hedgerows. So you can imagine this is a lot of hedgerows. And they work together. So they go into a new area and then they formed a plan for the next 10 years, and then they planted the hedgerows. And then this guy, he called me up one time and he said, "We can make collective hedgerows." I said, "Yeah, I know, everybody knows about that. This is very impressive. Can you learn us how to make collective plans? Collective nature plans, habitat plans?" And I said, "Well, we can try." And then he said, "What I will do is that I will write to all our local groups, 240 local groups, and tell them that we want to make a pilot project, and they can apply to be part of it. There is money for it." And I said to him, "And then you should write to the people. It's not enough that the chairman and the vice chairman of the group is interested. The local community should be interested." And he wrote that, called me up 10 days after and said, "We got 40 applications." This is when I knew that there is something here. This is 20 years ago. This is when I realized Jesus, this is just waiting to be realized. If we can get 40 applications in 10 days, there is an interest for this. So we went into the project, and this, I'm not going into this. The only thing I'm saying is that the project we choose was a project where they were working with the local stream. And they wondered, why did the fish disappear from the stream? Because the water was getting pretty clean. Of all the other things farmers were doing, the water was clean. It's been cleaned up. But there were no fish came back. That's because the stream, the physical condition of the stream was not right. And they learned that from experts. Then they formed an association, and then they made this application. And we went in and we made some kind of strategy. We didn't know how to make strategies at that point. We were really fighting in the blind. We didn't know how to do it. So we were doing, whatever we could think about. But we ended up with a strategy for renovation of the stream, and especially for the renovation of the meadows along the stream. But there were many other things. Everything has been realized. Everything. It's enormously many things they have done, these guys. Then about 15 years later, we came back, and then we made a survey. And we asked people how different developments have been. What about nature? Positive developments, negative, negative, and don't know. Mainly positive. Local community, certainly positive. Agriculture, some positive and some don't know. So there has been an appreciation of the project.
Will you reserve some time to tell us how are these meetings, how when you go to place?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I will tell that to other examples. Yeah, sure. But this is more important. We asked, what about collaboration with local authorities? Has that improved? For sure it has. What about collaboration among owners also? So this is 15 years after. So when we start other projects, we sometimes show these figures here in order to convince people that this is a good idea to go in here. That you get something out of it. It's not just nice talk. I will skip this one. We'll go to another one. And this is a particularly interesting. This is a village along the coast. Very fertile land to the left. And permanent grassland, salt marshes here, areas which are infrequently flooded with salt water. So it's like your lagoon, like you have the same type of area, and it's very important for bird life. It's a very important habitat, but it doesn't have any role anymore for agricultural economics. Historically, they were important because this is where they got the hay. The cattle was in the stable in the winter, and the manure they could bring on the arbor. So in Denmark we say that the meadow is the mother of the soil, because they moved nutrients from here into the soil. That was the cycle. But now there's no economics in this. Farmers don't graze this if they don't get money for it. The area is in a miserable condition. People move out of here. They don't want to live there. It's a remote area. So we were asked if we could go in and make some kind of collaborative strategy for the landscape around the village. They already had some renewal within the village. And there is a story here which I would like to. Later on you will see a plan. No, I'll tell the story when you come to that example. But the whole thing started with a meeting where there were about 40 people sitting. And during the meeting, something very interesting happened. And everybody was laughing. And they were laughing. It was about private property. And when this laugh was a game changer, it was a golden moment. And I will come because you don't know the context. But anyway, this is very important. You see, these are Natura 2000, all the blue here. So this is European habitats of European importance, and they are all. And this is the parish we are working with. And we did the strategy. Here the strategy was presented by a local person, a school teacher who was chairman of the strategy group. And here you can see the group of local people and some planners from the municipality. And she's explaining about you see the vision is a well-functioning village in a sustainable green agri-environment which is attractive for tourists interested in nature. This was the vision formulated by these people. And here is some idea about the different elements in the strategy. And the most important, at least seen from outside, are the salt marshes, the green areas here which should be grazed in order to maintain the value of the area. We finished the strategy, we went out of there. 2 weeks after, I was called up by a planner from the municipality and said, "You know what happens this morning?" I said, "No." A 10-year contract for grazing the salt marshes were made in one morning for all the salt marshes in the area, 250 hectares. One piece of paper, 10 years. This would not happen if we hadn't done the strategy, if we haven't worked together collectively. So when people are saying to me, this is time consuming, it's too many meetings, too much time, we cannot work there for 2 years if we don't have time for that. I'm giving an example like this. This is the best contract for grazing we have in the country. It was done in 3 hours in the morning, involving 15 farmers.
Can you explain us what is this contract for grazing? What is grazing?
Grazing, you put cattle on and you graze the land. So it's a little bit like the wildfire also, that you want agriculture to come back, but here you want agriculture to come back or to be maintained because of bird life. The salt marshes are extremely important, and Denmark has the biggest areas of salt marshes in Europe. So great proportions of the geese and wading birds, which come to Portugal in the winter, will be grazing here during the spring and fall. Will be on these salt marshes so they will rest between the North Pole, the Northern Europe, and Mediterranean. They will graze here for 2 or 3 weeks. So that's why they are so important. So the things take time, but when we are done here, a lot of things can be done very fast. So that's a general thing. This is another example. We have the experience that when you make these processes here, it's relatively easy to get. Farmers are quite active in this. There are a number of reasons, I won't go into that, but farmers are more active than other people, other residents in the rural. So they go in, but they don't go in with their farm business. And we have always been wondering, why don't they do that? Can't we do something extra to bring their business interest in? And we decided to do that in this project. And this was also started by a municipality, and it's a huge area. This is about 20 kilometers or something. And this is just showing how fragmented. One main problem here is fragmentation of agricultural properties. But the story, the point I want to make in this example is the start of it. because things sometimes can be done quite simple. You don't have to. We were going to have a meeting with the municipality about how do we bring in the commercial farming interest in the process. We organized a meeting. We were driving from Copenhagen over there. It's a long drive. And I was going with a PhD student, and then 3 or 4 days before, and said, what do you think will happen with the meeting? What do you think comes out of the meeting? The PhD student said, I don't know. I don't know what comes out of it. And I said, I think nothing is coming out of it. I think we drive over there, we have a nice meeting, we get coffee, and then we drive back again, and nothing has happened. Because the people we are talking to, they don't know anything about how we bring this in. We don't know how to bring it in. So I said, I think what we're going to do is that before the meeting, we will visit 3 of the big farmers for 10 minutes each. So I called up the 3 biggest farmers and said, I'm going to a meeting where we will discuss this and this, but we don't know anything. We don't know even if you're interested. So would you mind if I come by for 10 minutes explaining about the idea? And then when I go out, you do like this, or you do like this. And if you do like this, we will know. So we did that, and all 3 of them said, we are interested. They did like this. Then what we did is that before we started anything, we invited all the big farms. I think it was about 20 farms. We said to the farmer, if you think of other big farmers which are not on the list, please invite them. Because it was not about excluding others. We just want a big group of commercial farmers. And we brought them together. And we said, the first meeting, we said, we don't know how to do this. We have never tried it. We're going to discuss what is the interest of viewers in this process. So we were brainstorming. The first meeting we were brainstorming, there were also a few presentations from outside. And in the end, for the first time, 15 came. Actually, 20 was invited, 15 came. Next meeting, we also said to the farmer, if nothing happens, we will only have 1 meeting. We're not going to waste your time and our time. So we're planning 3 meetings, but if nothing happens, we stop after the first meeting. But then the next meeting, 16 came, and the last one, 17 came. And then we had a list of different issues that could be of economic interest to the farmer. And then we simply made a short questionnaire, and there was just one question: is this relevant, not relevant, maybe relevant, a little relevant, relevant, very relevant? And then we gave points, and then we could rank the different. And this was not what we thought it was. I thought this was be ranked very high. I also thought this was maybe the highest one because they make new buildings and they negotiate with the municipality about the conditions for building the new big buildings. But the farmers said this is not so important because we have good collaboration with the municipality. We don't have problems when we ask for permission. Okay, nice to know. Very nice to know. We're not going to use time on this. We use time on the traffic problems and habitat management paid for by EU, like we just heard. So this is a catalog of issues which were brought in. Then we made landscape analysis, like the one we just heard about from Monchique. And then we made an interview survey where we interviewed all the farmers about, it was a little more than 100, I think. One of the things we asked the farmers about, one of the questions we asked the farmers, we said, do you have favorite places here? Places you really appreciate where you would like to go? 1 or 2 places they could circle in. And then we accumulated all the, and then we knew some of the values seen from the local residents' point of view. So this is something we often do, to make maps of the values. Then we had 4 winter lectures. We call them winter lectures because farmers are not so busy in the winter. We have them in the winter. We had a lecture about the the history, especially the agricultural history of the area. We had a lecture on the habitats and biodiversity. We had a lecture on landscape, on the different landscape units, like we just heard, the landscape character, all this. And then we have the fourth one was on the cultural heritage, the cultural history. Just before the lecture started, I asked the people, how many of you participated in one or more of the other lectures? Everybody. What comes out of a lecture series is a common understanding. Actually, a common language, you could argue. And why is that important? Because if we don't have a common language, how can we talk together? So we need to establish a common language. So these lectures are very easy to organize. And I can tell you, they're very, very popular.
Who does the lectures?
Pardon?
Who speaks?
Who speaks? Experts from outside, your colleagues from our university, colleagues coming from outside. We say to the speaker, we say to the biologist, one of our colleagues from university, we say, would you like to bring your ecology, to put on your ecology classes? Go over and take a look at the area, use one day, bike around or drive around and see the area. And then we would like to see hear your opinion about the ecological values here, using your classes. And you can say whatever you like to say. There's no taboo. You can bring in all kinds of challenges and problems. And this is what we ask everybody about. And there is always a very lively discussion afterwards. And then we are starting, this is something we started about 4 or 5 years ago. We also put up a few questions every time. So we who the organizers, we put 1 or 2 questions. We would like what are people thinking about this or this and this. And then we put out a short paper and we collect them at the end. Very cheap way to get rich information. We have a heck of a lot of information coming out of these meetings also. And then we had 2 workshops about the future. And the green part is opportunities and values, and the red part are problem areas for different reasons. And then the strategy came out. And I'm not going into detail. A lot of things has happened. A lot of different projects, recreation of former wetlands, habitat management, a new forest, forest here around the village has been made. A number of different things. Yeah. So now we come to the story I wanted to tell first. This is the same village I opened. Remember the organic farm in my first lecture? It's from here. This particular project, this is where we started really being serious about this type of action research. We were contacted by this municipality in the middle of Jutland in Denmark, and they said to us, they have seen a national call for experimental planning projects. If we would like to send in an application together with them, we should not send it in, they should send it in, but we will participate in writing the application from the university. And we sent in an application for 3 different types of rural communities for making some kind of landscape strategy. We got the money, then it was announced in a local newspaper that we will be doing this and the top one. Then the chief planner, he called me up and said, you know what? My phone has been calling for 2 days. Everybody in our municipality wants such a plan to be made. And I said, no. We have a certain amount of money here, and we cannot, we cannot do it for free, and we don't have limited time. We cannot work with all communities. But then he said, I'll find some extra money, and we added 2 others. So we had 5. What did we do? We had common meetings. We asked people to make a SWOT. You know what a SWOT analysis is? Where you analyze the strengths and weaknesses, and which are internal, and then opportunities and threats, which are external conditions. We asked them to make a SWOT analysis of their community, and we had altogether maybe 3 or 4 meetings. Then they made a SWOT analysis. After the SWOT analysis, we had a workshop in 2 days, and we met in the center of the municipality, an afternoon in the school. Then we had a few lectures and discussions. We were eating together. Then people went home, and then we met up again Saturday morning, and then they started making the plan. And on the second workshop, we had an idea which we now call confrontation dialogues. And confrontation dialogues is about confronting internal and external ideas and knowledge. So we had these 5 communities. Each of them made a plan, and they didn't get any help in articulating the plan. We decided that we're not going to draw the plan for them, because then it's not their plan. But I also knew that this is going to be poor articulation. They're not used to plan making. And maybe also it's not very rich in ideas when it comes to it, because they're not trained in these things. So I talked to 5 colleagues and said, would you like to use 1 full week? 1 day, 1 full day in each area. In the morning at coffee, you get a briefing of the area and the problems. You don't see the local plan, you don't see their plan. But you get some bullets about what they are working with. Then you use the day as you will, and we appointed one of them as the chairman. He should be responsible for a plan which should be made by 6 o'clock in the evening. They were very disciplined. They were different. Agronomists, architects, landscape architects, biologists, a forester. So there were different disciplines. They thought it was fun. They got a little money, not much. And then these experts, some of them are sitting here, they're sitting listening to a local presentation of the plan. These are local people who present their plan to them. Actually, what they did is they did it through paintings. There was a local painter who said, we don't need to make maps and stuff. I can paint everything. So she was presenting a number of paintings, and they were listening, taking notes and stuff. Then they came up, and they presented their quick and dirty plan. And then there was the most amazing dialogue for 2 hours. And why was that such amazing? Because these people have been working with this plan for 6 months. And now suddenly, out of the blues, other people come and come up with ideas they never thought about. Half of them they burned down immediately because they know their stuff. But the other half, they were looking at each other and said, why didn't we think about that? That's strange. We didn't think about that. Why didn't we do that? We'll check it. And then they were stealing everything they wanted to steal from the experts. And then they got and you'll see the example. Oh, by the way, one big surprise for me, a big surprise. You see, these are the landscape types that Jorge also talked about. And I thought this would be very technical. They will just be listening. They won't intervene in the presentation, but they did. One of the first reactions said, oh, we never thought of our area like some types of landscapes. Oh, this is interesting. And then another one said, yeah, it's very interesting, but you didn't do it right. You did it wrong. Oh, really, the expert, the landscape architect says, so what is wrong? And then a big discussion started. This is something unexpected. Anyway, these are the different stages in the local plan, and this is what they presented to the experts. The first slide. This is the village where this organic farm is located. The first air photo you saw here this morning. This is the plan from the expert. The village here connected to the sea by 2 green corridors, connected to a wider corridor here to the left. And then there was different ideas about the village itself. They had ideas about the harbor here. There were different things. And some of them were shut down immediately. There was one farmer who said, so you propose a new subdivision up here? And the experts were sitting there, 5 experts said, yes. And the farmer said, so you propose new housing on a northern slope in our climate? Then the expert said, no, maybe that's not a good idea. So who was the expert here? But then there were the idea about a village forest. The local people said, village forest, fantastic idea. Why didn't we think about that? So after this, this is just to present the ideas about these corridors. And after this, one of the landscape architect in the group, he got money to help the local group to articulate, to frame the strategy or the plan. So he did like this. Okay. Now to the story back up at the salt marshes. When we started this, I invited 2 farmers on the very first meeting. I invited 2 farmers who have been involved in projects like this. One from this shelter belt, this stream case, where we made a strategy, and the other was a farmer here who had a big pig farm, a woman who has she was a very smart farmer, and she's exporting pigs to all over Europe. And she's really bright and full of ideas. She presented this plan to the people up at the salt marsh. Half of these 40 people were farmers, the other half were living in the village. And she went through all the different dimensions of the plan. And when she came to these 3 green corridors, I could see on her body language she didn't like it. She didn't like to present these 3 corridors, but she did. Then there were questions, and there were, a little discussion. I was chairing the meeting. And when everything finished, I said, I also have a question. She's called Dorte, the farmer. So I said, I also have a question, Dorte. I got the impression when you presented the 3 corridors, you didn't like them. Is that right? And she was not very comfortable. She said, yeah, it may be not a good idea, she said. And she said, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that they go through private property, and some of them are 200 meters wide. And here we come and impose an idea over private property, and there's already 2 or 3 farmers who are strongly against these corridors. And then I thought, okay, we cannot stop here, because now we're going to make a plan with these people there. So there was the other farmer with the stream. They worked already for 10 years to implement the plan. And he was also a farmer, so said, maybe we should ask you. He hadn't done his presentation yet. Maybe we should ask you, because you have experience in this. What will you do if you have a plan like this? And then you discover that some of the private property owners here, some of the farmers, they don't like it. They are strongly against it. Will you then take out the corridors, or will you leave them on the plan? What will you do? And I didn't have any idea about what the man would say, of course not. But his answer was very clear and very obvious. He said, if the local community wants the tree corridors, they should maintain them on the plan. Because if they take them out of the plan, they can be sure of one thing: they will never come. They will never be made. If they maintain them on the plan, they may be made in the future. And then he said, then there are 2-3 farmers who are against. And then he said, there always is. Eventually they die. And when he said that, the whole room exploded in laughter. It was almost like the roof went up. And this was the most wonderful laugh I ever heard in my life. Because that means that after this laugh, we could talk about private property without this. And these guys who were sitting there, they were the ones who made a 10-year agreement for all the salt marshes in collaboration. It was not because of this laugh they did it, but the laugh was when it started. Okay. I have a few more examples. I know what to do. This example, the point to make here is that we started on an area like this. This is also an island. We started here, and we wanted to make a strategy. It was in order to improve these 2 villages. That was the goal. But something completely unexpected happened. To one of the first meetings, people came from outside and said, we insist to be part of this. Now, I remember the first one said it to me. I was drinking coffee and I said, this is over time. It's too late. We're not going to change the project now. It's financed and everything. But he maintained his insistence, and they moved into the process. And we ended with a very, very good plan for a big area. And it had a lot of impacts on what's going on here. And I'm not going into that. It's about excavation of clay, special form of clay which is unique in the world. And it's being excavated here to a large extent. And this whole thing changed everything. Because all the politicians were very much in favor of the company who extracted the clay. But during the process, they realized that this is not the future of the area, clay excavation. The future of this area is tourism and residential development. Because it's such a beautiful area and it has such a lot of potential. Everything changed. During the process, it was completely unexpected what happened. Yeah. Yeah, I will finish now. This is the last example, and it takes 1 minute. In this is the one which just finished, and this is already a paradigmatic case in Denmark. It's finished last year. People are calling up their politicians in other parts of the country and said, we want a plan like this. It's about flooding. It's about climate adaptation in river valleys. It's about a lot of things, and it took almost 4 years. There was a local strategy made in the middle of it. And I can just tell you the end of this. This is the vision for the river valley as a whole. This is from the local part of it. These are new grazing areas. They are almost realized, all of them now. What we're going to do now is that they will make an association called the River Valley Landscape Association. And we will make a new project where we'll work with landscape governance for the next 4 years. So we would like pretty much this association to take over the spatial competences of the area. If that's possible, that will be a revolution. But I mean, nobody would expect this to happen during the process, but it happened. People started working together. You know what? You know one thing. We made a survey. We interviewed 200 farmers. One of the questions we asked was, if there is a collective grazing initiative taken, would you bring in your these are wetland, these are wet meadows. Would you bring in your meadows into this project? Would you let your piece of meadow be part of a bigger piece of meadow? Including maybe your own livestock, if you don't have livestock, permitting others' livestock come in? And they could say yes or no or maybe. Okay? 80% said yes. 80%. And now comes the point here. We said to the farmers when we interviewed, when we have the results in terms of table and we have done all our analytical work, you will be the first to see the results. It will not be our colleagues in Portugal or England or to conferences, it will be you. So we'll organize a meeting and then we'll present the results to you and discuss it with you. And then we did something which I really strongly recommend university people to do. Some of the questions before we showed them, we asked people, what do you think was the result? So this about the collective grazing, people got some clickers, you can get some, I don't know if you can also do it with your mobile phone. You can make a system where you can vote from your seat and then the results comes up instantly. So they got some clickers and then we said, if you think it's between 0 and 20%, you click 1, 20 to 42 and so forth. And the most people thought it was between 1 and 0 and 20% who said yes. But it was 80. So what does that mean? That means that almost everybody were interested, but almost everybody didn't think that the neighbor were interested. It's very simple. But the way to see it can be an eye-opener. This way would be then I said to people, okay, what are we waiting for now? Why don't we just start to do it? And then we made these plans and they are being implemented. And there's a lot of, like in your wildfire program, there's a lot of money for this because this is about converting extensive farming into extensive farming to make the meadows more wet. So there is no the climate impact is reduced a lot. When you farm drained areas, you have a heck of a lot of CO2 coming up and also methane coming up in the air, like a little bit like your paddy field sometimes. If you make them wet, this is reduced a lot. So this is it. Yeah, this is it. And thanks and there is nothing more. Yeah. Most of what I'm saying has been written in English.
Yeah, here we can see the literature.
Yeah. So it can be distributed. I was thinking that maybe also being a design, I'm co-authoring a book. I have been co-authoring a book about landscape analysis, where we present a heck of a lot of different techniques for landscape analysis, including some of the ones we saw in the Monchique presentation.
to bigger events and more cohesion. This is my infernal process of discovering some things. This is the most close to the solution that I'm trying to reach here, but the right one. And these drawings try to illustrate most of the idea, and I leave this here for reflection. Thank you.
This is an interpretative center for the rules. You are expecting that the archaeologists will discover more of the past.
The idea is to build a place, a building that has that, but it also has places to anthropologists, archaeologists, students to develop studies there, excavate, be in contact with the people, organize events, treat the landscape, and be there for a month or weeks or whatever.
Even because it's not only the castle. Monchique is really an archaeological site, very important to take things from Neolithic, so it could be like a hall.
Yes. It could be a research center or something like that.
There was also, when we were there was also a lot of, a few industrial structures that were abandoned, like a
Yes.
huge carpentry, that we visit also to suggest new functions. And there's a big.
There are many challenges in the main village, but this came with a suggestion of the class that my fifth year had that was related to heritage, and this place in concrete, it was I thought it was a good idea because it is a protected zone, so it has to have something over there.
And it was also, in the beginning, I thought it was also an alternative to foyer, because it's also a beautiful sightseeing.
Yes.
And they used to bring tourists to foyer, which is awful because they have a lot of antennas and a very ugly building for crafts, and so the big bus go all there, bring the tourists to the top of the hill, and they found that there is another hill, not one but two, and it's more beautiful, more natural landscape, and has this heritage component that the other doesn't. It's not a nice place. Foyer is not a nice place, but this is. Also, there was the Solar, a palace in nearby villa, who was expecting to be bought by the CTO. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
From last year, and there was an architect student.
There was
trying to make a program for him.
there was
there is some water mills, right?
water mills along the
river, which are
rivers.
like 3 or 4 water mills with the picnic areas, but some of them are private lands. But it would be nice to make a circle. There was a lot of spots to go
And
on.
there was the monastery that is ruined also.
Yes. Yeah, that's.
There's a man that lives there or something.